Oh, good morning, Reed Intermediate School. I hope you can hear me. The time is now 9:30, so it is, well, only a day after we were supposed to do this. Hope you guys had a fantastic snow day yesterday and got out there and messed around a little bit, built snowmen or sledded or whatever is the thing for you to do on a snow day. It's kind of hard with virtual school now, whether what a day off exactly looks like. But I am so psyched to be here with you today. Thank you so much for inviting me into your school and into your homes. I'm Gordon Korman, author of Restart. So the first thing I want to say is thank you guys so much for reading Restart, for an author to know there are kids out there reading my stuff, thinking about it, enjoying it, laughing at all the right places. Nothing quite like it. That's kind of the deal when you're a writer. You keep reading, I will definitely keep writing. So, about Restart, I hope nobody is disappointed when I start by telling you guys this. It's not a true story. This did not happen to me. I have never had amnesia. I did not fall off my roof. I don't really know anybody whose personality totally changed after a traumatic brain injury. I'll tell you where the idea came from. So I was just kind of thinking, what makes us the kind of people we are, right? Like your personality, is it sort of hardwired into you? You're stuck with it. It's your nature. You can't change it no matter what. Or is it more like nurture? Like your personality is shaped by, the people you meet, the stuff that happens to you. Um, you know, on TV news, they're always saying stuff like, oh, scientists are performing a study to determine blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, they should really do a study about this. And I started thinking, just sort of for fun, like, what would that study have to look like to work? And I kept coming back to amnesia, right? When your memory is totally like wiped, do you go back to the kind of person you were before, or might you be totally different? And that's really where I got the idea for Chase and what happens to him, right? Like, what if the worst kid in a school, sort of bully, 90% of the school lives in fear of Chase Ambrose. He's messing around on his roof. He falls, lands on his head. He's okay, right? He survives, but he loses his memory. Total amnesia. And the book would really just be almost about one question, which is he going to go back to the kind of kid he used to be, the bully, or is this his chance to restart his entire life and be a different kind of kid? Now, I know you guys do a lot of writing at Reed, so I'm sure you talk about, like the first draft and rewriting and revising. I wrote a decent first draft for Restart. I think the one thing I really sort of messed up was I made it too simple. So in the first draft of Restart, the minute Chase woke up from from his coma, right, woke up in the hospital, he was instantly a different kind of person. So the book almost read like, oh, he used to be so mean. Now he's nice. Yay. And the more I thought about it, it just seemed like it just seemed like a ripoff a little bit. Like you don't get to be a totally different person, boom, because one thing happens to you. You're probably looking at me on the screen like, dude, Chase doesn't even remember the kind of kid he was before. Well, true. Chase does not remember his old life, but his old life, as you see reading the book, is totally still there, right? I mean, his co-bullies, remember Aaron and Bear from the football team, like the power that he used to have as kind of the alpha jock and really the alpha jerk of that school is just sort of waiting for him to reach out and grab it. And he's tempted, not because he's a terrible person, but because he's got no connection to who he used to be. This is the only thing that makes sense. He has to choose to not take it, right? He has to choose to be a different kind of kid. Is it ever possible to totally restart? So there is a little bit of experience in that, and I guess with bullying, I was lucky in that I was not really bullied as a kid, but I do remember it was actually seventh grade, and there was this one, I don't know, like period of a couple of months where this kid just thought there was nothing more awesome than running up behind me in the playground as fast as he could and smashing into me from behind, and it was actually kind of devastating because I wasn't expecting it. Right, it's almost like if you're a football fan, do you ever see a quarterback sacked from the blind side when he has absolutely no idea it's coming? Devastating, right? His whole body crumples, usually fumbles. That happened to me maybe twice in my entire seventh grade year. And I still remember it. I'm in my 50s, right? But I keep thinking to myself, what if that hadn't happened twice? What if it had happened, 10 times? Then maybe in school that morning, I would not be able to concentrate because I'm worried about what's going to happen on the playground at lunch recess when so-and-so is coming up behind me. What if it happened 20 times, not 10? Maybe then I couldn't even sleep the night before because I'm so worried about what's going to happen on that playground. It can get into your head, and I remember I did an event with a group in Indiana. And normally when you're an author of kids' books, the people who invite you to come talk are, like Reed Intermediate School or a group of teachers, librarians, maybe a bookstore. This was the doctors in, I think it was St. Joseph's County, Indiana. But they actually believe that when bullying really gets into your head, it actually becomes a health problem if you can't sleep and you can't concentrate. And you see that in Restart, where the character of Joel Weber, I mean, these bullies are so under his skin that he has to actually move out of town. So I didn't really base Restart on that much personal experience, but at the same time, as I was writing it, those experiences from seventh grade came back to me. The last thing that I hope you found familiar reading Restart is just being a kid in school, right? Like everything in Restart kind of orbits this one middle school. And I love writing about middle school. I mean, it's the setting I use, in 95% of my books. And I think the reason is, I'm not even sure you know this about me. Do you guys know that I wrote my first book when I was 12? It was my seventh grade English assignment. So I've been doing this for more than 3/4 of my life. And it was really almost a mistake why it started. So true story. In my middle school, as a seventh grader, get this, the track and field coach had to teach us English. And that was really almost by accident. Like they were an English teacher short, and the way our schedule worked, the only adult who was free to cover our class in that period was this coach, right? So nice guy, good teacher. At the time, though, he had never taught English in his life. He was like 22. It was his first year teaching. So all his training was PE. He had never taught English before. And when it came to creative writing, he just sort of didn't know what to tell us to do. And he drew a blank. He stood there saying, okay, work on whatever you want for the rest of the year. Guys, it was February, right? So from February to June, we had a full class period, like 45 minutes in my school, to work on one thing. And at first, I just started writing, in school time, because what choice did I have? That's what we were doing. I got into it, right? My story took off, kind of. I began bringing it home, working on it at night. And this is my project. a book called This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. And you could see it's not the thickest book in the world. Oh, you know what grade I got on this? B plus. So they actually gave me A plus on the story, but they deducted 1 grade for messiness, right? Like I was in middle school in the 1970s. Back then, you could not write on a computer or an iPad or a Chromebook. Like I wrote the whole novel in cursive on one of those, those old, the marble notebooks, right? So how did I get it published? I was the class monitor. I don't know if you guys get this. Scholastic book orders. So back in the day, they used to let a kid run Scholastic book orders for the entire class. And that was me, right? So if you think about it, I had their address, right? Because it's printed on all the book order sheets. I mailed my 7th grade English assignment to the address on Scholastic book order forms. You're kind of looking at me like, that works? I lucked out. The guy at Scholastic who opened up my packet found my school project. Right? Now, I didn't send in the marble notebook with all the scribbling in it. Truth, my mom typed it for me. So it was a stack of typed pages, right? That's what the guy read. He liked it, so he kicked it up to his boss, and she liked it. So a few days after my 13th birthday, right? So at that point, 7th grade is done, and I was an 8th grader. I signed a contract for my very first book. And it still took like a year for the book to come out. Like the book business is sort of slow. But there I was at that point, 14, right? I was a freshman in high school and my first book came out. Guys, I turned 57 this fall. So I've been doing this, as I mentioned, more than 3/4 of my life. That book has been out for more than 40 years. It's been in, other countries, other languages. There are 3 Netflix movies spun off it. It's been translated into French, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Italian, Korean, Dutch, and Greek. Isn't that wild? Like to see your 7th grade project in Norwegian or, Dutch or Chinese. I love looking at my books in other languages. Can't read them, right? But if the alphabet's the same, you can pick stuff up still. Like, so McDonald Hall is a school, right? So the principal is a guy named Mr. Sturgeon, and his nickname behind his back, they call him the fish, right? In French, he becomes Monsieur Sturgeon, and his nickname becomes Caviar. It's just not a slam dunk to translate stuff into other languages. Like I wrote this one book. I mean, not one of my more famous ones. It was called Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire. I was trying to write for little kids. Like I've never been kind of good at that. But I did do this one. And when Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire was done in French, the book translated fine. But when you think about it, how do you translate the title? Right? Because Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire, I mean, that's just an expression, right? And you can't translate an expression since you're not really saying what you mean to begin with. My translator told me to put Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire, word for word, into French would be like calling the book, Teller of Untruths, Your Trousers Have Combusted. And that sort of blew me back a little bit. But I knew this guy who worked for Pepsi, right? The drink company. He was like, oh, that's nothing. Remember a few years back, there was an old Pepsi ad on TV, and the big slogan was, come alive with the Pepsi generation. Well, supposedly, when they translated that into Chinese, it actually turned out to say, Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave. So I don't feel so bad about my little liar. Um, Restart, when you actually translate that title into French, it actually was more like enemy number one. You know, almost like we in America say public enemy number one. The idea that you can't really give the title a restarty kind of feel in French, but they kind of focused on the idea that at this school, Chase Ambrose was public enemy number one. Like the titles can really be different. I have a book called Ungifted. So what Ungifted was done in Spanish, the first thing they said to me was, dude, there is no word in all of Spanish that means ungifted, you know, the way you use it in this book. It's kind of a regular, average, not gifted kid who gets sent to the super genius gifted academy by mistake, right? So I remember when my Spanish Ungifted came, I'm expecting a book with a one-word title because, you know, that's what I wrote. You know what this book was called? Un chico de lo más normal, which I believe means a guy who is extremely normal, right? Or maybe a guy who is way normal. Way normal is the closest you can get to ungifted in another language. So, long story short, I wrote my first book for school. You know, I wrote my second book. It's sort of hard to describe. I just wanted to prove that it wasn't a fluke, like prove that I could do it again. And then it became my hobby. And it just went from like school project to hobby to summer job, you know, high school and college. And eventually it just became my real job, right? Now, when I first got started writing, I wrote from a lot of personal experience because back then I was super close in age to my characters, my readers. I mean, really not that much older than you guys. But then, you know, as you can see, I got a lot older. And I mean, you know, I'm not trying to make a joke about it. Like, I have great experiences as a guy in my 50s, but they don't fit into the books I write because I write kids' books, you know. So halfway through my writing career, I had to totally reinvent where ideas come from. And I found the solution in two words. What if? Okay. I know this sounds a little bit corny, and honestly, I would not say it if I didn't really believe in it. What if are the two most powerful words for writers? Because think of any story, any movie, any book, any TV show, there's always a what if baked in there somewhere, right? What if the ungifted kid got sent to the gifted school by mistake? Or how did I describe Restart? What if the worst kid in a middle school got a total do-over at his entire life? What if kids had to steal back $1 million baseball card they've been swindled out of? That's another book of mine, Swindle. But even true stories that nobody ever sat down and made up, they usually work as what ifs too. See if this sounds familiar. What if the world's largest ocean liner hit an iceberg and sank on its maiden voyage? Nobody made up the Titanic, right? It's true story, really happened. And yet it totally works as a what if. So in your own writing, if you ever get writer's block, just ask yourself, okay, what are the what ifs of my story? And if I've got a good what if, that's really all I need. I mean, what drove me through Restart and Chase's experiences, the what if of what was happening to this guy. Now, Restart is a realistic fiction book, but it works for anything. It works for fantasy. I have a book called What's His Face. Okay, and the what if could not be simpler. What if a kid gets a new phone, right? Happens all the time. You know, when you get a new piece of technology and it's got like the very latest software on it, it's always just a little bit buggy, right? So this kid is absolutely convinced that his brand new top of the line phone has a virus. Okay. It doesn't. You know what it has? A ghost. This phone is not glitchy, it is haunted by the ghost of a kid his age who died of, get this, bubonic plague in the year 1596. What if a kid got a ghost in his phone? It can be intense, it can be serious, it can be funny, and it can be really out there. You know, I have a series called Masterminds, right? So, what if the luckiest kids in history suddenly realized everything they thought they knew about their perfect lives was a lie? And I mean everything. Like the town you live in, fake. Your identity, 100% fabricated. Like even the people they thought were their moms and dads were actually scientists who have been studying you since the day you were born, because your entire life is actually an experiment, right? It's actually this twisted experiment called Project Osiris. And to me, that's really the power of What If, because the way you flesh out a story like that is you put yourself in the place of those characters. I mean, what would it feel like to be, I don't know, 13? And you discover that that is your reality. Well, my characters are not real people, they're made up, but I just knew how they would respond. Their answer was, bye. Like, I am out of here. We have got to escape Project Osiris. Here's the thing. You can't escape Project Osiris. There's an invisible barrier around their entire town, right? So as soon as these kids are born, you get this tiny chip surgically implanted. Like it sort of goes about here, base of the skull, but you can't feel it. You can't see it. You have absolutely no idea it's there. However, if you get outside of town where the barrier is, you start to feel sick, right? Like just a little bit queasy at first. But here's the thing. The further you go, the sicker you get. And eventually you'll just pass out. Guys, that's a what if too. So the only thing that might be more important than what ifs would be research. I know a couple of the questions are about research. So all books require some research. Like if the parts of your story that are real, you just need to know what you're talking about. Some books take more research than others, right? Restart being the book that we all kind of know in common. It didn't need tons, but it did need, I had to figure out stuff about amnesia and how it works. And you might be looking at me like, what's the research? The guy forgets everything. Well, Chase forgets a lot, but if you think about it, he doesn't really forget everything, right? Like he wakes up in a coma, from his coma, I'm sorry. He's in the hospital. Mom's sitting in the bed next to him. Does he remember her? No. But when he says, "Who are you, lady?" That proves that he remembers how to speak, right? How to make his mouth work. He remembers the language, right? When he needs to go to the bathroom, he remembers, you stand up, you put one foot in front of the other. That's how that goes. Research, you forget amnesia, you forget everything, but you don't forget like the basic building blocks of how to function as a person. It's just sort of like your actual museum of recollections that gets kind of wiped clean. And as time goes by, with most people, those memories sort of slowly start to come back. I mentioned Swindle, right? The book about the $1 million baseball card. So I had to research what makes certain really old baseball cards worth a lot of money, right? Just being old does not necessarily make a card valuable, right? So I started researching it, and it was a great topic, but this name kept coming up again and again. Honus Wagner. You ever heard this name before? Honus Wagner is the baseball player on the most expensive, valuable card of all time. So he played in the year 1909. Turns out in 1909, kids didn't collect baseball cards. Adults did. So they used to sell them in cartons of cigarettes, right? Remember, 1909 was way before they knew any of the bad stuff, like the real health problems about smoking, right? But this guy, this baseball player, Honus Wagner, he was way ahead of his time. Honus Wagner was anti-smoking in 1909, and he went to the company and he refused to allow them to sell his card with cigarettes. So when you fast forward from 1909 to today, more than 100 years, the Honus card is the rarest card in the world. That's why it's so valuable. Not because it's old, because it's rare. I think there are, it's either 6 or 7 of that card anywhere in the world. But the last time one of them sold in perfect condition, it actually went for more than $2 million. And I actually think it might have been closer to 3, right? That honestly is the kind of thing you can only get from doing research. And research sometimes, I don't know, like sometimes it sort of falls into your lap. Like you sort of picture yourself, studying with a stack of books or staring at the internet till your eyes start to bleed. Sometimes you just notice stuff, and that can be research too. I work with school kids a lot, and I actually visit schools. And I have this book called The Unteachables, right? The research that started The Unteachables was a school visit. It was a middle school in Kansas, right? I remember that. And I was having lunch with these 8th graders. And one of the things they were all talking about was driving, like driving cars, And finally I just said, what are you talking about? Like how could you possibly be driving? You guys are in the 8th grade. Turns out in Kansas and a few other rural states, you can get a limited, it's called a provisional driver's license when you're 14 years old. It's kind of to help farm kids, drive like tractors and help out with their family farms, right? But what that means is, not 50 years ago, but like today, you have legally, kids driving their own cars and vehicles every single day to middle school. I was like, dude, I have got to write a book about this. And I created this character, Parker. I named him Parker because he is not the greatest driver in the world, but he's really bad at parking. But he was the first of the Unteachables. And the Unteachables kind of came from school visits too, just because I love schools, but the one thing that kind of bugs me is sometimes at schools are too good at like putting labels on people, ooh, this is the advanced class. Ooh, this is the not so advanced class. Kids are just as bad, by the way. This is the nice teacher. This is the mean teacher. This is the tough teacher. So what if a school got this brilliant idea that they were going to take all their problems and put them in the same class, kind of all your rotten apples in one basket. And they end up creating like the unteachable class. And like, that's not bad enough. They give the Unteachables to the most burnt out teacher in the entire district. This guy, Mr. Kermit. He's like 8 months from retirement. He doesn't care if anybody learns anything. He just wants to put in that time, get out of Dodge. So you're looking at me like, this is awesome, right? We got the worst class. We got the worst teacher. It is instant train wreck. Well, not necessarily. Remember, you don't get in the Unteachables unless you've got kind of an attitude, right? The only person with a worse attitude than them is their teacher, the guy who only wants to put in his time and get out of town. So what if, my favorite words, what if the unteachables look at their teacher's bad attitude and it kind of reminds them a little bit of themselves? What if Mr. Kermit looks at his students' bad attitudes and it kind of reminds him why he became a teacher in the first place, like a million years ago? What if by some almost like reverse math, worst class plus worst teacher somehow equals the greatest class in the history of school? So that's another research. There are some topics that require tons and tons, right? Like, I don't know if you see my newest book. It's called War Stories. It is a World War II book, right? When you're writing about an event like World War II, or I've done stuff on like Mount Everest or the Titanic. I mean, you just have to do tons and tons of research because these topics are so big that if you don't know what you're talking about, it's just going to be horrible. In fact, you should try Googling World War II, because one of the first things that comes up is that World War II is the largest single event in human history. You would think of all this other stuff. No, World War II. And everything connected to it is the biggest of its kind. You know, War Stories focuses on a 12-year-old kid whose great-grandfather, when he was 17 in 1944, he lied about his age so he could fight in, well, he eventually ends up fighting in D-Day and some of the, liberates Paris and ends up liberating this other town and kind of being heroic. So everything is connected to, everything connected to World War II is the biggest of its kind. D-Day is the biggest invasion in human history. The ships that brought the D-Day invaders from England to the Normandy coast of France, largest fleet of ships ever assembled. The food they had to pack for all those guys, largest collection of food ever. The equipment, largest collection of equipment. And the more I learned about D-Day and World War II and the European campaign and the liberation of Paris, it was just knowing about the topic, like immersing myself in what I needed to know about the Second World War, made it possible for me to write that book. So anyway, that's a little bit about Restart and a little bit about my other books and where ideas come from. I do have your questions submitted by your classes. So let's get to that now. Let me take a sip. Okay. So in Mrs. Vaccaro's class, the question is Restart based on a true story, and where did I get the idea for this novel? So I mentioned that the main storyline, the amnesia and Chase kind of becoming a different kind of kid, that is not a personal experience. Really, there were little bits and pieces of real experiences. Nothing huge. I knew a kid. You know how Chase's room is on the dormer window, right? Like you got the diagonal roof of the house, and his room has the window that sticks out. I had a friend who that was his room, and he used to open up his window, and when he wanted to chill with like a book or music, he would like literally step out and kind of sit on the edge of his roof. He was very, very daring. I was chicken. I always used to freak out, like, what if this kid falls off his roof? Another bit of personal experience that went into it, again, was Brendan and his video games. His videos, YouTube videos. All three of my kids, they are now older, right? They're 21, 18, and 15. But at some point, every single one of them went through a stage where they were really, really into YouTubers. And so that was kind of the inspiration for this kid. What if there was a kid who was just obsessed with becoming a YouTuber, but he needed that one video to go totally viral to kind of, to catapult him into into YouTube fame. All right. Next, we got Ms. Song's class. Why did you decide to write a book about a bully who falls off the roof? And where did the ideas for Restart? Did I start with the plot or with the characters? So, I mean, I tend to be a plot guy. And I think that for me reflects the challenges that I have as a writer. So there are a lot of people who really struggle with getting an idea. I have millions of ideas. For me, the biggest struggle is making the jump from idea to story, right? The difference being an idea can be anything that pops into your head. A story kind of has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So for me, what I look for is, the beginning. I want to know the ending, sort of. I mean, I don't need to know it exactly. And then I want like 2 or 3 big events in the middle. And when I've got that, then I know that it's a good time to start writing. So for me, the what if, right? The what if of what if a guy did this total do-over on his life was first. And I created Chase's personality to fit into that, right? So it really could have worked with anyone who was extremely one way. I mean, I guess you could do it in a lot of ways with any super strong personality that becomes the opposite of that personality. But to me, you make the point the best with the bully, a really, really tough case, mean kid, not just kind of a jerk, but really someone who has adversely affected the lives of people around him. And if he could sort of, because of an incident, like because he gets that sort of amnesia and gets a chance to sort of start his life over, it seemed that if he ended up a different kind of kid, that would be the best way to sort of complete that particular thought experiment. Great questions, you guys. All right. Next, we've got Ms. Michaels. What sort of research went into learning about amnesia? How did I feel when I finally finished the book? I talked a little bit about what inspired me to be an author. And do I picture the characters in my head? I think a lot of readers find that disappointing. Like, I did not have an exact picture of Chase Ambrose or Brendan Espinosa or Shoshana or any of those characters in my mind. I mean, I definitely picture them, but they're a little bit more indistinct, because I know there are some writers who imagine specific actors or people they know as those characters. I did not picture the characters of Restart or any of my books, except, so I don't know if any of you guys have read my Slacker books, right? Like, I wrote this book called Slacker, which is sort of inspired by my oldest son, who is not a slacker, but as a high school kid, he was really a video game addicted couch potato. So when I wrote about this kid, Cameron Boxer, I always specifically pictured my son with his Xbox Live headset, kind of raging over the network. And the network to me is fascinating just because it goes everywhere, right? So you could be playing with your best friend who lives, 2 doors over, but you could just as easily be playing with some guy in Vladivostok, Russia, where it's like 3 a.m. and the guy is 47 years old. So, so sometimes I will have, a specific view of a person, but most of the time, no, and definitely not with Restart. Okay. Let's see. This is Miss King. Did I take inspiration for the plot or style from other authors? So the idea of telling a story with multiple perspectives, the way it's done in Restart, I actually did get that from another author. Probably no one at Reed has read this author, Tama Janowitz. She writes for adults, and she had written this book about called Slaves of New York, and it was about the art scene in New York City in the 70s and 80s. And it was told by these multiple perspectives. And it was really funny in certain parts because there could be different narrators who could be describing exactly the same thing, and it came out completely different, just based on the personality of who was talking about it. I was like, I wonder if that could work for a kid's book. And that inspired me to start writing from multiple perspectives. And a lot of my books, obviously Restart, but also Slacker and Ungifted and the Mastermind series, a lot of mine are told from those multiple perspectives. Also, Mrs. King, what is my favorite book written by a different author? So I am a gigantic fan of the original, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Not a kid's book, but I think a lot of kids read it in probably sixth grade and definitely through middle school and high school. It's kind of a science fiction, really funny comedy. And why did I choose the cover? Actually, I didn't see that question before. A lot of people ask me about that. I did not design the cover of Restart or any of my covers. The only broken glasses in the book are Brendan's when he does the stunt where he rides the tricycle through the car wash. Not that that's such a huge scene, but I think the designers, I don't know for sure because it wasn't my idea, but I think that they thought that broken glasses was a really good sort of image of bullying for a book that sort of deals with bullying. Who knows exactly, but that would be my guess. Like on a cover, you don't so much look for a scene specifically from the book as you look for an image to represent it, like broken glasses for bullying, or I don't know how well you saw the War Stories cover, but it's actually for toy soldiers, right? Really, you could have put a gigantic battle scene from D-Day on there, or you could have put something in the life of a 12-year-old protagonist, or you could have put a 93-year-old man. But these sort of toy soldiers just kind of represent, all the different elements of war stories. You've got the war, you've got the soldiers. This would be World War II appropriate, like technology, and also the fact that they're toys sort of indicates the fact that there is kind of a whole kid dimension to the novel. Okay, back on to Ms. Mastroni. Okay. How do you create novels with such suspense? I think one of the things I talked about when I talked about the rewriting of Restart, I added that suspense in the second draft, right? That it started off being like you instantly knew the chase was different. And when I did the revision, I wanted to see to it that you don't know till the last chapter if this kid is going to be able to do it. Will he be able to be a different kind of kid? So I think it's just like, I know it's probably not the nicest trait in the world, but I think that authors are really good at messing with people, right? Because in a lot of ways, when you're a writer, you're messing with your reader, right? Because you know exactly what's going to happen, but the reader doesn't. So you sort of string them along a little. You give them some, they call them red herrings, like false clues to what's going to happen, and you sort of hold back that resolution until it finally happens. And that's kind of how you build suspense. So those of you who are already talented at messing with people, you are probably pretty good writers, or at least storytellers too. Okay, I talked a little bit about the points of view. Why the strategy? I just think it's awesome that you can get into the heads of different characters and really show how different people view the same events completely differently. Um, and is there a reason that I write about troubled kids in my books? I mean, you know, the one thing about a book is if everything is perfect and good and nice, there's no story, right? So I don't know. I mean, Chase is obviously more troubled than a kid like Brendan, but Brendan has his issues, right? There is always for every character a gap between who they are and who they want to be, and I think that gap is kind of what the story runs through. The journey of the story is between the way things really are and the way things maybe can be. Now, in an unhappy story, it goes from like a better reality to a tragic, a tragic end game. But that difference, that difference between the way characters are and the way that they ultimately will be, or the way that they can be, that journey is, I think, what makes a story work. Okay, now we're on Mrs. I apologize if I say this wrong. Rugavac. If I could go back and change one of the characters, who would it be and why? And where did I get the idea for characters' names? I don't know if I change anybody in Restart. Since writing the book, I've thought a lot more about the characters of Aaron and Bear because they're just so awful, and nobody's Voldemort except Voldemort, right? Like this is not Harry Potter. So if I had it to do over again, I don't think I would have made them nice, but I think maybe I would have given a few more glimpses about who they were and why they turned out to be the kind of bullies that they were. And their names. So Chase, I'm not sure. I don't know a Chase. There's a WWE wrestler named Ambrose, I think. I think my kids were like really into WWE when I was writing the book. Brendan wasn't really somebody I knew. Like, I don't think any of these names were gigantically particular to the book. And if Brendan had been named Kevin, would it have been really, really different? I get a lot of my names from the Social Security website. It's ssa.gov, because they will give you popular baby names for every year. So, if you know the age of your kids, you could just plug in like around when they might have been born and see what the 1,000 most popular boy and girl baby names were for kids born that year. That's kind of a cool resource that I use sometimes. Okay, Ms. Quinn. Was I like any of the characters in Restart, and did I have a relationship with people like Chase and Shoshana? I feel like I've known people like many of my characters. I mean, especially obviously in the case of someone who's based on a kid like my son, like in the Slacker books. I didn't really base anyone in Restart specifically on real people that I knew. And I was not a member of a video club in high school, but I sort of feel like the kids I hung out with in high school were not dissimilar to the video club kids, right? They were sort of a more creative group. They were definitely not the super popular kids of the school. And I think that one of the most admirable characters in Restart, even though he's clearly in many ways a goofball, is Brendan Espinosa, right? Because if you think about it, those video club kids, most of them, they hate Chase just because of what they knew Chase had done to them in the past. And he is the first one who instantly gives Chase a chance when he realizes he is not the same kid. So goofy, yes, but I really find him to be an incredibly admirable character. Very much like the kind of kids that I went to high school with. Let's see. Oh, if I were to write a sequel to Restart, what would the story be? I'd love to write a sequel to Restart just because the book has so many fans. I can't think of anything. But the closest I am now to coming up with another restarty book would be not a sequel, but almost like a prequel, like a story that takes place before the accident, where you sort of see the original chase, which I think might be kind of hard because if you like this character in Restart, he would have to be, I mean, like not only as bad as Aaron and Bear, but he would have to be worse. But I keep thinking, about, well, maybe Aaron and Bear weren't so bad, and Chase was the guy who turned him to the dark side. I don't know. I have not started yet. This book is not, I'd say at best has a 50-50 chance of being written. But those are sort of the thoughts that I have if there was going to be another Restart book. So that's all the questions we have, and I think I've used up a lot of your time at this point. So I just want to finish off by saying what I said before. Thank you again for reading Restart and doing such an amazing job, sort of thinking about this book, but also enjoying it. Because I think that's I write my books to be enjoyed. I want people to laugh at the funny parts and sort of kind of jive, kind of vibe with the story a little bit. It's amazing to me that at 57 years old, I'm still really doing what I did for my 7th grade English assignment. I feel really, really lucky that I'm still writing books after so many years. So I want to thank you guys for reading, because me writing the books is really only half of them. It's the fact that kids are reading and enjoying them that makes it possible for me to keep doing what I'm doing. So thanks again for inviting me into your school and your homes. And thank you so much for being readers. Oh, and thank you, Mrs. Wassley, for setting this up. Bye.